Hi everybody, today I'm going to show you how we're going to glaze our pinch pot animals. Now, a couple of things. Glaze is different than paint. It is specific for ceramics, and when you put it on, it does not look nearly as bright of a color, and it will not look shiny until it goes into the kiln to get heated up again, and it will turn into almost like a glass surface. You do not want to put glaze on the bottom of your piece, where your initials are, where it sits on the table. That's because while it's in the kiln, that glaze could stick to the kiln shelf, and we don't want that to happen. If you get a little on the bottom by accident, I can wipe it, but try not to get glaze. You don't want to intentionally glaze the bottom. Now, the best way to think about these pinch pot animals, I think, is two colors. I would think of what is the main color you want on this, and then maybe a second color, like if you wanted a second color inside the bowl or a little tiny bit in the ears or somewhere like that. You want a fairly thick coat. I think I'm going to make my mouse gray, and I might make inside here pink. So those are going to be my main two colors. You'll notice that there's a brush that goes with each color, and you want to start by a pretty thick coat of scooping up the glaze and dabbing it in there. So I'm going to scoop it up and I'm going to dab it in. I think it's probably best to do the inside first, and you want a fairly thick coat of glaze. Instead of brushing it really thin, I'm getting a bunch on my brush and I'm dabbing it in there. You want to finish getting that all in, and then I'm going to move on to my gray. Now, while I have my pink on my brush, I may want to do a few areas, but I need to know that I might have to go back and redo them. Things like the eyes, I would not attempt to do. You absolutely don't want to do black early on. Black should be the very last thing that you add, but I could add a little pink to his nose and his ears. Now, when I'm ready to go on to my gray, I'm not going to use the same brush. That brush stays right with the pink, and I'm going to move around the table to where the gray glaze is. And the same thing, I want to start and I want to dip and dab it on and do a nice thick coat all over. I can go right over my eyes, or I can try to go around them, but it's very difficult. So going right over them is not bad. You can always go back and touch up the eyes with like a little dot later on. You can get the underneath this part, because this is not where it's touching the table. I just don't want the very bottom. So I want to go along. Sometimes it's easier to set it upside down on the table. That's fine. You just don't want the very bottom, but you want to keep dipping and dabbing. I'm not doing a super thin brushed coat like that. I'm dipping and dabbing to get a nice thick coat, because anywhere that I don't have glaze, like can you see right along the edge of his head there, it will not be shiny. It will still just look the white that it looks like now. So you want to keep dipping and dabbing all around. Sometimes when you get to these little crevices, you have to get a little on your brush and just swish it around in there. It is very difficult to do little tiny details with this. So that's why I'm saying you want to think about two main colors. If you have little details you wanted to add, like if you had a fish and you wanted to add little scales or a turtle with specific shell, you may want to think about the main color that it's going to be first, and then after it comes out of the kiln, we can add little line details like that. Same with like the eyes. If you want to try to do something with the black for your eyes, you can, but keep in mind you want to have a very tiny amount of glaze on your brush and just touch it with the tip. But like I said, it's very easy to get it where you don't want it to go. So you may want to wait and do that later with the marker after it comes out of the kiln. So after you get your entire thing glazed, if there's anywhere that looks light, you'll notice it does get, as it dries, you can see this pink in the ears is already drying. See how it's dull? That is good. That means that it's dried. But you want to make sure you have a nice solid coat dabbed all over your animal. And then when you're finished, you're going to put it on the tray and go on back to your other project. So I hope that you have fun glazing your pinch pots.